We start at the intersection of them all, the battle for control of Iraq's oil. Whether or not you believe it was the goal of the U.S. invasion in the first place, oil is certainly the key to Iraq's future. It's also key to U.S. plans for the country, and U.S. politicians have been talking about Iraq's oil law for months. They've just been using different words.
The oil revenue sharing is a very interesting aspect, and this is what people are watching for.
We surely want to see the benchmarks the Iraqis have allegedly agreed to.
Benchmarks.
Benchmarks. Benchmarks.
Benchmarks.
Benchmarks. Benchmark.
The president's own benchmark.
Benchmarks, benchmarks, benchmark.
Benchmarks. Benchmark.
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 His benchmark.
Now infamous milestones or benchmark.
Our patience is not unlimited.
We have imposed this and we have chosen to this benchmark on our government, and I can tell you the hydrocarbons law is going to be ratified.
That's right, the number one benchmark for both Republicans and Democrats, the Iraqi Parliament passing the oil law. And that's why we're going to take a closer look at the fine print. Under the new law, multinationals would return to Iraq under production sharing agreements, or PSAs, a kind of contract usually reserved for places where oil is hard to get at and expensive to explore. Now, Iraq is one of those countries where you stick a straw in the ground and start counting barrels. Later in the show, former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, John Bolton, will make the case for the law. But first, an Iraqi blogger who got a leaked copy of it early this year posted it online and helped spark the debate. Raed Jarrar is in Washington. Raed, welcome to On the Map.
Thank you very much for having me.
Raed, one of the ways that the law is being sold is that it will reduce the sectarian violence, that this will be one of the keys to bringing security to Iraq. What's your view on that?
My view is this law, accompanied with other policies by the Bush administration, are a recipe for a long-term sectarian war, civil war between Iraqis, because this law falls in the bigger agenda of separating Iraq into three sectarian and ethnic-based regions, a full-scale civil war that Iraqis will not see its end.
What will the impact of this law be on the control of Iraq's oil? What will change?
What will change is that, according to different Iraqi experts, between 90 and 93% of Iraq's fields will be given to foreign companies, and the remaining number of fields, the around 7% of fields that will remain for the Iraqis, will be taken from the central government's authority and given to regional and provincial authorities.
One of the contentious parts of the bill is these production sharing agreements. What's the mechanism for deciding who gets these production sharing agreements and what the terms of the contracts are?
Yeah, who will get the PSAs will actually get exclusive right on Iraq's oil fields for the next 35 years and share Iraq's wealth and own Iraq's oil for the next 35 years. The people who will decide that, ironically, are the foreign companies themselves. There is this newly formed council called the Oil and Gas Federal Council. Mm-hmm. And oil companies, foreign oil companies, will have representatives sitting on this board deciding to pass their own contracts and where the Iraqi money should go.
Okay, surely the oil company executives are not the only ones sitting on this Federal Oil and Gas Company Council.
No, of course, there is representation from Iraq, but out of Iraq's 18 different provinces, there are just 3 provinces that are being represented on the Federal Gas and Oil Council. Mm-hmm. So this keeps someone like myself, who was born in Baghdad, or someone from Mosul or Nasiriyah, without representation on Iraq's Federal Gas and Oil Council, and someone from ExxonMobil will have his say or her say there.
So what do you think the impact of that composition will be? Because the way that this law is being sold in the United States is that it's necessary to share the revenues and bring Iraq together.
The impact will be exactly the opposite. This law doesn't really deal with sharing the revenue. This law deals with separating this fund from having one major bank account for all Iraqis to have small bank accounts for Iraqi provinces all around the country. And it will, lead the country or threaten the country's unity. So if the Bush administration or others were actually concerned with Iraq's unity, they would keep the current laws and try to enact better ways of revenue sharing instead of completely destroying the current oil regime.
Where does the law come from? What is its story been?
The official version is that the Bush administration and the IMF and others were actually pushing towards having a new Iraqi oil law and helping create this oil law. Like, for example, the State Department hired a contractor called Bearing Point to write a new oil law. Then that official tale of the story ends just in mid-2006, when at a sudden some random Iraqi in Britain voluntarily writes this law without getting any funds, and this law that he wrote in English is exactly identical to what Bearing Point was working on and what the Bush administration has been working on for the last 4 years.
Raed, we're out of time, but thanks for being on the map.
Thank you very much.
Now, here are some of the events that led up to the oil law. In February 2006, the U.S. asks consulting firm Bearing Point to advise Iraq on drafting a new oil law. Later that year, the U.S. government and oil companies get the first look at a draft of the law. The Iraqi Parliament doesn't see it until early 2007. And then in May of 2007, On the Map gets the U.S. State Department version, quote, "The government of Iraq prepared the national draft oil law and is wholly responsible for its content." You can find more of the timeline and even the draft of the law itself for the policy obsessives among you on our website at cbc.ca/onthemap. Coming up after the break, big, powerful, and obsolete. The G8 gets a wake-up call.
I frankly don't care what the outcome of this law is.
He's blunt and combative, but I can be too. My encounter with John Bolton on Iraq oil and U.S. interests. Back on the map in 3 minutes.